Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. Christmas Eve used to mean something. At least, it did for me. It was the one day of the year when I could count on my family showing up. No matter what had gone down, no matter how bad things got, we always gathered. It was tradition, or at least that's how I saw it. The snow was always falling, quiet and thick, like a blanket over everything that was broken. I remember spending hours picking out the perfect gifts for everyone, carefully wrapping each one with ribbon and a little card. I made sure they were heartfelt. I wanted them to feel like I'd put real thought into them. Like maybe, just maybe, that would make them see me, really see me, the way I saw them. I spent the afternoon baking cookies with Dad, like I did when I was a kid. He was always the one who wanted to make everything from scratch. Even though he'd been slowing down in recent years, we still stood side by side in that cramped kitchen, rolling out dough and laughing over dumb jokes. Mom was busy as usual, arranging silver bows on every possible surface. She was obsessed with them. That was her thing. Silver bows and perfect tablescapes. Then there was Drew. He was the one who was always the star of the show. I loved him, of course, but it got harder and harder to ignore how everything revolved around him. And now, with his baby on the way, it seemed like no one cared about anything else. Not me, not the business I built, not the sacrifices I made. It was all about Drew and his new little family. I drove over to my parents' house in the snow with the gifts carefully stacked in the back seat. I had this naive hope that this year maybe things could be different. Maybe they'd see me. Maybe they'd remember me. When I rang the bell, the door opened, but instead of the warm embrace I was expecting, there was just a cold, surprised look from my mom. She looked at me like I was the last person she wanted to see. Before I could say anything, she snapped, "Can't you just disappear?" And before I could even gather my thoughts, Dad's voice rang out from inside. "You're not part of this family anymore." I didn't argue. I couldn't. The gift still sat in my hands, and I turned around, my heart heavy, and walked back to my car. I didn't even bother to drive home first. I just parked in a nearby lot and sat there staring at the snow. I sat in that empty parking lot for what felt like hours, the cold pressing in around me until I couldn't stay there any longer. I drove back home, alone with the hollow sound of my engine. I thought about my childhood, how it was always the same. Drew, the spark, the one everyone adored. He didn't even have to try. All he had to do was smile, and everyone in the room would bend in his direction. I wasn't like that. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who always picked up the slack. I didn't mind it, not at first. Someone had to hold things together, and I was fine with that. But looking back now, I can see how easily I slid into the role of the invisible one, the one who did the work, who kept the wheels turning while everyone else was caught up in Drew's latest antics. And trust me, those antics were always something. He was wild, always in trouble, always charming his way out of it. It didn't matter how many times he messed up, because somehow his failures were always spun into something noble. "Oh, he's just so misunderstood," Mom would say. "He's just got so much potential." And me? I was the one who made things happen. Who ran the kitchen, kept the bills paid, and figured out how to get through the next day. My business was doing well. I should have been proud of it. But my family didn't really get it. They didn't understand the late nights, the constant planning, the pressure. It was like I was invisible to them too, even when I was right there. When Drew's wife got pregnant, it was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, I was needed. But not in the way I wanted. No, it wasn't because they saw how hard I worked or how much I had built. It was because they saw a chance to get Drew into something stable, and they wanted me to make that happen. Mom called me, the tone in her voice full of that desperate hope she always seemed to have for him. "Can you help him, Terry?" "Just a little. He's going to need something to fall back on with the baby coming." I should have said no. I should have told them that he needed to figure things out on his own, but I didn't. I couldn't. So I brought Drew in, offered him a job in my catering business, a light-duty kitchen assistant position. Nothing too big, nothing too important. I just needed him to show up, do the work, and learn some responsibility. But Drew? He was Drew. He didn't show up on time, or sometimes at all. When he did get there, it was with that same lazy smile that made him so good at getting by. He joked around, wandered through the kitchen like he was the center of the universe, and did the bare minimum. I gave him the benefit of the doubt for a week, maybe two. Maybe he was just adjusting, I told myself. But after 3 weeks, he quit without warning, just walked away. "Drew, where are you going?" I asked, standing in the middle of the kitchen. I didn't even recognize the frustration in my own voice until it was too late. I just, I don't think this is for me. He shrugged. Like it was no big deal. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the 10th. But this time, something in me snapped. He didn't care. He never had. And my family? They'd never ask him why he gave up, why he never put in the effort. They just twisted it all into some story about him being misunderstood, that he'd just needed a break or wasn't ready yet. But I was done. I'd been ready my whole life, and no one ever noticed. I didn't say anything after that. I didn't beg him to stay or tell him how his actions were affecting me or how this latest failure only reinforced everything I already knew about our family's priorities. I just let him walk away, like he always did, and I kept working, like I always did. And in the end, it didn't matter. Not to him, not to anyone else. A few weeks passed, and I didn't hear from Drew. Not that I expected to. It wasn't like he was ever one to check in. Life carried on. My catering business was still running, still thriving, though it felt different now. Something in me had shifted, like I'd finally woken up to the fact that I was always the one putting in the work, but never getting the recognition. Then, one evening, as I was scrolling through my phone over a bowl of leftover pasta, I got a message from Sarah, a friend in the industry. She'd always been plugged into the local food scene, and I trusted her instincts. The message was simple. Thought this sounded familiar. I clicked on the link she'd attached, and there it was, a glossy brochure for a new upscale food service company launching in town. It was one of those fancy operations, the kind with the pristine fonts, the clean layouts, and photographs that made everything look far more elegant than anything I could ever afford to pull off. But as I flipped through, I froze. The branding? It wasn't just similar, it was identical to some of the designs I had used for my own marketing materials. I felt a sick feeling settle in my stomach, and I couldn't look away. The photos, though, were what really got to me. The dishes they were featuring, all artfully staged on white plates, glistening under perfect lighting, looked like they'd come straight out of my own menu. Specifically, one of the appetizer spreads. It was eerily familiar. I knew that exact dish. I had developed it for an unreleased wedding package months before Drew's disastrous stint with me. The ingredients were unique, the presentation was all mine, and no one else had seen it except for me and my small team. But maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe this company was just that good, I tried to tell myself. People can come up with similar ideas, right? Fusion cuisine wasn't exactly a rare concept, but something in my gut twisted. The longer I looked, the more it gnawed at me. Then, I saw it. A recipe name and layout. It was one of mine. My heart skipped a beat. It was a recipe I had worked on for months, tweaking it, testing it out on a handful of loyal clients before I even thought about adding it to the menu. The layout was exact. The margins, the font I used for the ingredients list, it was all so specific, so clearly mine. And I knew exactly who had access to it. Drew. I stared at the screen, suddenly feeling like the walls were closing in. My mind raced, connecting the dots. Drew had been in the kitchen with me, had helped prep those dishes, had been around when we were talking through menu ideas. I hadn't wanted to admit it to myself, but there was no other explanation. He'd stolen my work. I went back to the brochure, scrolling through the rest of it like I could will the truth to go away. But it was all there, staring back at me. The branding, the menu items, the unmistakable style that had always been mine. Drew had been in my kitchen, watched me design my menu, and then he'd taken it. The disgust hit me in waves. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. But I stayed still, feeling like I was sinking into the chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I picked up the phone and scrolled through the rest of the brochure, hoping I was wrong, hoping there was some other explanation. But no, every dish was something I had crafted, every concept was my concept. The quiet rage in me began to build, slow and sure. Drew had been lazy in my kitchen, had barely lifted a finger, and now this theft. And all along, my parents had been acting like he was the one who deserved the benefit of the doubt. They'd never believe it, not without proof. I could already hear Mom's voice in my head. He wouldn't do that, Terry. You must be mistaken, but I wasn't mistaken. I knew exactly what he had done. I shut the brochure down and sat there staring at the screen for a while longer. I had to think. I had to figure out what came next. The idea of confronting him was nauseating, but I couldn't let this go. This was mine, and he'd taken it, and now I was going to take it back. I didn't tell anyone about what I'd found. Not yet. I wasn't ready to confront Drew, not until I had all the facts. I wasn't even sure I'd tell my lawyer yet, but I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something worse was coming, so I made the call. I'd worked with Alan for years, and though he was good, I knew this wasn't going to be a simple case. I could already feel the weight of what I was about to ask him. He could dig, and he could find something, but there was no way this was going to end cleanly. Still, I needed answers. I couldn't just sit here, staring at stolen work while trying to move forward with my business. I tried to keep things low-key, quiet, especially with the holidays coming up. I didn't want to make a scene before I had all the information. The last thing I wanted was for my family to get involved before I knew what I was up against. Drew was already so good at spinning things. If I made a move too soon, I'd end up looking crazy. Alan took the case seriously, though. He dug into everything, my digital files, my systems, all of it. I'd given Drew access to certain documents when he worked for me, trusted him to help out with recipes and ideas, but there were strict boundaries. Those files weren't his to take. Alan called me a few days later, right as I was finishing up a meal prep for a client. His voice was all business, no small talk. Terry, we've got a problem. Drew used his old login to access your files, all of them. Recipes, menu concepts, supplier contacts, everything. My stomach twisted. I thought I knew, but hearing Alan say it out loud was a different kind of sickening. Are you sure? I asked, my voice shaky even though I didn't want it to be. I'm sure. He downloaded it all, Alan continued. I've got the digital records to prove it. This wasn't a mistake, Terry. This was intentional. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. It wasn't just that Drew had taken my ideas. He'd gone further. He'd used them. And I hadn't even realized how much he'd taken until Alan mentioned it. Wait, there's more, Alan said, and I could hear the frustration in his voice now. Drew sold your content to a hospitality firm for $350,000. He presented it as his original work. I felt the world tilt. $350,000. That was real money, a lot of money. And it wasn't just some backdoor deal. It was a full-blown transaction. Drew had gotten away with it. He'd taken everything I built and turned it into a paycheck for himself. And the worst part? He probably didn't even feel guilty about it. Do you need me to do anything? I asked, but my voice was hollow. We're looking into what we can do legally. The firm is now demanding a refund. They're pissed they were sold stolen intellectual property. Alan's voice shifted, and I could tell he was working through the mess. But we've got a bigger issue. We'll have to move fast to preserve your rights. I sat down at the kitchen table, numb, and rubbed my temples. I didn't even have words for the betrayal anymore. I felt like everything I'd done, everything I'd built, had just been turned into something for Drew to cash in on. And what hurt the most was that my parents would probably side with him. They'd always seen him as the golden child, the one with potential. Alan and I talked logistics for a while longer, but I barely heard him. My mind was too tangled up with what was happening. Drew had crossed a line I never thought he would. But what did that say about me? Had I really just let it go on this long, never standing up for myself? And then there was the holiday coming up, Christmas Eve. I still hadn't decided whether to show up at my parents' house, but now it felt pointless. Why put myself through another round of their indifference, their blind loyalty to Drew? They wouldn't even see what he had done. They never had. He'd always been their boy, and I was just the one who did the work. So I waited. Let the legal wheels turn, let Alan sort through the mess. But as the days crept closer to Christmas, I couldn't ignore the weight of it all. I wanted to just stop. Stop pretending that things could ever be the same. Stop chasing after a family who had already chosen sides. But I hadn't let go of that hope yet. Not fully. Maybe I'd show up. Maybe I wouldn't. But when the night came, I'd have to make that choice too. I thought about not going, but I told myself I should. Maybe it was stupid hope, or maybe I just wanted to believe things could still be fixed. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, that if I showed up, we could talk about it like a family. I hadn't seen them in weeks, and I hadn't seen Drew in even longer. Part of me still thought maybe the holidays would change something. But when I rang the doorbell at their house, I could already feel it. The tension was thick in the air. It was like walking into a storm, and I knew I was the lightning rod. I shouldn't have been surprised. Mom opened the door with that sharp, cold look she always wore when something was wrong. She didn't even give me a chance to say anything before she snapped, "What the hell do you think you're doing, Terry?" I blinked, confused for a second. What? You think you can just destroy everything Drew's trying to do? She shoved the door open, the sound of her voice echoing through the house. You've ruined his business, ruined his future, and now you think you can just show up here like nothing happened? My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't what I'd expected. Drew had already done the damage, but now they were looking at me like I was the enemy. Dad walked up behind her, his face twisted in that expression I knew too well. His tone was clipped, all business. You don't belong here, Terry. You've made your choice. You're not part of this family anymore. My mouth went dry, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. What are you talking about? I. Don't try to spin this, Mom interrupted, her voice rising. Drew said you're jealous. He said you were just trying to sabotage him. You involved lawyers, Terry? Lawyers? She shook her head, disgust dripping from her words. You're trying to ruin everything he's worked for. I didn't know what to say. They believed him, didn't they? All of it, every single word. They'd taken his side, twisted everything into something that made sense to them, even if it was a lie. I wanted to scream, but there was no point. No one was listening to me, not Mom, not Dad. I didn't argue. I didn't even try to make them see the truth. What would be the point? I had already seen the story play out 1,000 times before. Drew, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And me? I was just the one who tried to hold everything together, the one who never mattered enough. I turned away, the lump in my throat choking back anything I might have said. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't even look back. I just left. It wasn't until I was in my car, driving aimlessly down the street, that I realized how heavy the silence was in my chest, the kind of silence that fills you up and leaves you empty all at once. The streets were empty, just like I felt, and I had no idea where I was going. I ended up at a takeout place, grabbing something quick and greasy. I ate it alone in my apartment, staring at the empty space around me, not really tasting the food. That night, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt alone. More alone than I'd ever been. Because the truth was, they'd never seen me. Not really. They never would. 3 days later, Alan called me. I could hear the weight in his voice, like he knew what this was going to do to me. Terry, it's worse than we thought. Drew didn't just take the recipes. He took everything. Your business plan, your supplier contacts, all the proprietary materials you've developed over the years. All of it. I sat down hard at my kitchen table, my fingers going numb on the phone. What do you mean, everything? I mean, everything. He had full access to your digital files. He downloaded it all, everything tied to your intellectual property. And now the hospitality firm is suing him. Alan's words felt like they were hitting me one after the other. They're backing out of the deal, and they're demanding their money back. I didn't say anything for a long time. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't a surprise. It should have been, but it wasn't. Drew had already shown me who he was. He'd just taken everything he could, and now it was all unraveling. Are you sure? I asked, even though I didn't need to. I'm sure, Alan confirmed. They've got proof. They've traced it all back to him. I hung up, feeling the finality of it. Drew had crossed every line, and now the whole thing was crashing down around him. I wasn't sure how much satisfaction I should feel from that. The anger felt too big to be satisfying, like it wasn't even mine to claim anymore. That afternoon, as I tried to push through some work, my phone rang again. I saw my mom's name on the screen. I thought about ignoring it, but something in me needed to hear what she had to say, even though I knew it wouldn't be anything good. Hello? Her voice was sharp, tight. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, Terry, but you've ruined everything. I closed my eyes. What are you talking about? Don't act dumb, she snapped. You've got Alan involved. You've taken this to lawyers. What were you thinking? She took a deep breath, then added, You've ruined Drew's future. He's trying to build something, and you've just destroyed it all. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything Drew had done, she was still blaming me. Mom, I didn't do anything to him. He took from me everything. You should have come to us, she said like it was so simple. You should have talked to us before you went to lawyers. Now look at what you've done. You've turned the whole family against him. I couldn't hold it back anymore. You don't get it, do you? You never have. He took from me, and you're still defending him. He stole my work, and now he's facing the consequences. You should be angry at him, not me. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, hear the way the words were stuck in her throat. But instead of listening, she just said, I don't want to talk about this anymore. You've made your choice, and just like that, I was done. I didn't yell. I didn't beg her to understand. I didn't cry. I just hung up. I didn't need to say anything else. I didn't call anyone else. I didn't make any speeches. But later that day, I stopped the automatic payments I'd been sending to them. The money I'd been quietly slipping to cover part of their mortgage. The money I'd been sending to Drew when he couldn't pay his bills. I didn't even think about it. I just stopped. There wasn't a big moment of clarity or some grand decision. It wasn't dramatic, like some movie scene where everything changes in an instant. I just cut it off, as quietly as I could, without anyone knowing. No one noticed, at least not yet, but I felt it. I felt the weight lift. I'd been holding on to something that wasn't mine to keep anymore, something that had never been mine. And now, I was done. A few days later, I was sitting in my apartment, trying to focus on work, but all I could hear was the ringing in my ears from everything that had happened. The quiet that had settled into me, the space I'd carved out for myself after cutting them off. It felt fragile, but it was mine. Then there was a knock at my door, a sharp, sudden sound that made my heart skip a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I stood up anyway, not thinking it'd be them. I opened the door, and there they were, my parents, Drew, his wife, and their baby, tucked in a carrier, oblivious to the storm rolling in. Suitcases, lots of them. I blinked, confused, and tried to steady myself. "What are you doing here?" My voice was flat, more controlled than I felt. Mom didn't even hesitate. "We're here to stay for a little while, Terry." I just stared at her, my mouth dry. "Stay? What are you talking about?" Drew stepped forward then, looking at me like I was the one who'd messed this up. He had the nerve to act annoyed, his voice low and impatient. "You knew this was coming, Terry. The house is being sold, and we need a place to stay while everything gets sorted out." I could feel my blood boiling, but I didn't let it show. No way. I tried to step back, to shut the door in their faces, but they just kept standing there, blocking my view of anything else, like it was all so normal to them, like they had every right to just walk in. Mom gave me that look, the one she always used when she thought she was doing me a favor. "It's just for a few days. We don't want to burden you, but the sale of the house? We need time to figure things out. Drew's got a lot of legal trouble, and well, your family." I felt like I was in some bad dream where none of this made sense. "You think I'm just going to let you all move in?" I repeated the words, hoping it would sound as absurd to them as it did to me. "Come on, Terry," Drew muttered from behind her, rolling his eyes. "It's the least you can do after everything." "You owe me the audacity," hit me like a punch in the stomach. I couldn't even process how they thought it was okay to show up like this. No warning, no asking, just walking in like they were entitled to something they hadn't earned. I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm, but my heart was pounding. I looked at them, Mom, Dad, Drew, standing there with their bags, their expectations, like I was some kind of fool for not just rolling over. "I'm not doing this," I said. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. "You're not staying here." Drew's face twisted in frustration, but I didn't care. I didn't care if he was angry or confused or whatever. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. I stepped back from the door, keeping my eyes locked on them, and reached for my phone. Without looking away, I dialed building security. "Hi, this is Terry Ellis in apartment 3B. I need some assistance. I've got some uninvited guests who need to leave immediately." It was quiet for a moment, but then Drew, looking more irritated than ever, muttered something under his breath about me being a bad sister. "You're making a scene," he said, like he was the one who'd been wronged. I didn't respond. I just waited. The click of the elevator doors opening on the other side of the building was all the confirmation I needed. When the security guards arrived, I led them into the hallway, pointed to my family, and said, "They're leaving. Please escort them out." There was no argument. There was no scene. Drew glared at me. Mom's mouth opened in that shocked disbelief she always wore when things didn't go her way. But no one said anything. They picked up their bags, the baby still oblivious, and they left. I didn't look back as the door clicked shut behind me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned around, and I went back inside. I made a cup of tea, sat down on my couch, and stared at the empty space around me. It was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't because I was waiting for something to change. It was because I was finally, truly alone, and this time, it was exactly what I needed. The months that followed were quiet, in a way I hadn't expected. Drew's life came crashing down just as mine had. His wife left him not long after the house was sold. I don't know if she ever really knew the full extent of what he'd done, but I know she found out enough. Apparently, she stumbled on some flirty messages he'd sent to a woman during his solo vacation, a trip he'd taken while she was pregnant. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard about it. I didn't gloat or take any comfort in seeing his world fall apart. I had too much of my own mess to clean up to care about his, but I didn't forgive him either. I'd given him enough chances, enough space to prove he could change. He never did. The family sold the house, most of it going toward Drew's legal settlement. He was still paying the price for what he'd done, and I knew that deep down, my family wasn't really seeing it for what it was. They were still scrambling to hold things together, looking for someone else to blame, someone to fix it for them. I stopped keeping track of what they were doing. It didn't matter. I focused on rebuilding. My catering business, what was left of it, became everything. I poured myself into it like I never had before. The late nights, the early mornings, the constant grind of keeping everything running. I was more determined than ever to make something of it. Not for them, not for Drew or anyone else, but for me. I had no time for the drama, no energy left to care about their messes. The truth was, I was tired of chasing validation that wasn't coming. I had spent so long trying to prove I was worth something to them, trying to get my family to notice the work I'd done. But now, I was just done. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anything from them. What was mine would stay mine. I woke up each day feeling calm. Finally, there was no more scrambling for their attention, no more pretending I could fix something that had never really been mine to fix. I was working harder than I'd ever worked, but it didn't feel the same. It wasn't frantic, it wasn't desperate, it was just work. And for the first time, it felt like I was doing it for the right reasons. I wasn't earning anything from them. I wasn't looking for anyone's approval. I was building my own future now, and I didn't have to explain it to anyone. I was in the middle of prepping for an event when my phone rang, the name on the screen unfamiliar. I wiped my hands on my apron, then answered. Hello? Terry, this is Alan Foster. I'm your grandfather's lawyer. His voice was calm, but there was something sharp in it that made me sit up straighter. I'm calling to inform you that your grandfather has made some changes to his will. I was still trying to shake the sleep from my eyes, but I forced myself to focus. What kind of changes? Everything, he said, his words clear. He's changed the beneficiary of his estate. Everything now goes to you. I didn't speak right away. My mind was a blur, struggling to wrap around what he was saying. My grandfather, still alive, still sharp, had made me the heir to everything. All of it. After all these years of feeling overlooked and dismissed by my own family, it was my grandfather who had always seen me for who I was. He was the one who saw something in me when no one else did. I remembered when I was 10, and he gave me my first chef's knife. Create something, he'd said. It was a small thing, a simple moment in the grand scheme of my childhood, but it stuck with me. That knife, those words, they shaped me more than I'd ever realized. I sat down, stunned, the phone still pressed to my ear. Are you sure? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Alan was the last person to joke about something like this. Yes, Terry. It's all in the new will. I'll send over the full details, but I wanted you to know personally. I felt this strange, quiet shift inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't filled with bitterness or resentment. Instead, I felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. For years, I'd been trying to earn the recognition from my parents that I'd never gotten. But this wasn't about earning anything. This was about being seen, truly seen for who I was, for what I had done. My grandfather had always been the one person who got it. He saw me not just as a daughter or a niece or a sister, but as someone who was creating, building something with my own hands. And now, all of this legacy, was going to me. I sat there for a while, the phone still resting in my lap. Slowly, the reality of it all began to sink in. The house, the money, the history. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't some cosmic payback for the years I'd spent invisible in my own family. It was recognition. It was the acknowledgement of everything I had worked for, quietly and without fanfare. I hung up the phone and sat back, staring at the empty counter in front of me. I had a choice to make. I could sit back, take what was handed to me, and rest in the comfort of my grandfather's faith in me. Or I could use it, and that's when the idea hit me. I knew what I had to do next. I wasn't just going to sit on the legacy my grandfather had given me. I was going to build something of my own, something that could carry his name forward in a way that mattered. I started planning the details for a cooking school, one that would give underfunded kids a chance to learn what I had, real skills, real opportunity, no matter where they came from. It wasn't about the money. It was about the chance to create something that mattered, something that could change lives. I felt a spark I hadn't felt in a long time, like I was finally doing something that was truly mine, something that couldn't be taken from me. And for the first time in ages, I felt like I was finally walking the path I was meant to walk. A few days after the call from Alan, my phone rang again. This time, it was Drew's ex wife, Sarah. I hadn't heard from her in months, not since she left him. I didn't know what to expect, but I answered anyway, cautious. Hi, Terry, she said, her voice hesitant but clear. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. No, it's fine, I replied, sitting down at the kitchen table. I wasn't sure where this was going, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. What's up? I just. I wanted to apologize, she said, and I could hear the weight behind her words. I should have said something sooner, but I didn't know how. I know now what Drew did to you, everything he took from you. I was too blinded by everything else to see it at the time, but I see it now. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the rush of emotions that threatened to spill over. It wasn't like I needed her apology, but hearing it felt different. It felt like maybe, just maybe, there was some kind of accountability in the world. I'm sorry, Terry, she said again. For staying silent, I should have said something sooner. I wasn't sure how to respond. I didn't want to hold on to any more anger, but I wasn't ready to forgive her either. I appreciate you saying that, I said quietly. It means something, I guess. There was a pause before she spoke again, softer this time. I know this might sound strange, but if you want, I'd love for you to be part of my baby's life. I know that might not make sense, but I want you to know the offer's there, if you're open to it. Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't even thought about the baby since they'd left, but the idea of being a part of something so pure, something that wasn't tainted by Drew's lies and selfishness, hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I stared at the photo on the wall beside me. It was from when I was a kid, standing next to my grandfather in his kitchen, the two of us covered in flour, both of us smiling. It was the first photo of me as a real cook, the first time I felt seen for what I was. Next to it, I had framed the first recipe card I'd ever written down. Simple, but it was the start of everything. I glanced around my small but warm home. I had built this space for myself, from the ground up. It was mine. No one could take it from me. I'll think about it, I said finally, meaning it. I wasn't sure what that would look like, but I wasn't going to rush into any decisions. Not this time. After the call ended, I sat there for a while, letting the silence settle around me. I had been so focused on what I'd lost, on everything Drew had taken, that I hadn't fully realized how much I'd gained. I was still building something, still creating, and now it was something no one could steal. The legacy I was building was mine, and only mine.